today. It's a little weird. All right. Well, everybody, how are you guys doing? It's time to start. And we have today Vince and Bill from WNS Denali, and they're here to talk to you guys about sourcing. We covered, kind of like the highlights of sourcing last week, and we'll dive more into it as we go on through the course. But sourcing is really where things kind of start. After we identify the need of the customer, they give it to us and they expect us to magically make it happen. And Vince and Bill are just happen to be some master magicians that make things happen. So if you guys give your attention to them, I appreciate it. And if you have questions, be sure to type them in the chat, or if Vince and Bill are willing, just go ahead and say them out. That way they can address them as they happen. So
feel free to stop us in the presentation if you have any questions.
Vince, Bill, go ahead and take on the show.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here. You have to share.
The security features,
Yeah.
Let's see here. So I'm giving both of you guys co-hosts, which should give you pretty much everything.
Yep. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, share my screen here.
There you go, Vince. I can see it.
Okay, let me get back up to the first slide. All right. So, like Professor said, we're here to talk about strategic sourcing. Bill and I work for a company called WNS Denali. We'll do quick introductions here. But let me go through these objectives first. First thing, we want to introduce you to the role of sourcing within procurement. Second, we want to give you an overview of the sourcing process. Third, we're going to show you the Denali way sourcing process, which, if another company were to come in, maybe like an Accenture or a GEP, they might show you something slightly different, but in the end, we're all kind of doing the same thing. And then we're going to give you an RFP example. So before we go any further, my name is Vince Communal. I've been with WNS Denali for about 7.5 to 8 years. I have worked on a variety of different clients. The first 5 years I worked at Denali, I worked on, we can't give client names, it's a confidentiality thing, but I worked for a company that was a large chemical manufacturer. Ran a lot of bids for obviously chemicals, but other things too, like cafeteria services. Employees have to eat. Sometimes we don't think of things like that. Office supplies, janitorial services, safety showers for people working with chemicals, boxes to put chemicals in. The company that I was the client, they made a lot of silicone, so we had to find a supplier to box up all that silicone to send it to places like Home Depot, things like that. Then I moved on to a large shoe manufacturer based in the Northwest. I'm sure you can figure out who that was. I did a lot of projects with them that were more like green initiatives. They had a very large initiative to decrease their carbon footprint. So we were looking for things like sustainable shelving, obviously sustainable materials that were going into their shoes. So when these things went into the landfill, they were biodegradable and things like that. Then I moved on to a company where I was doing mostly contracting work, so reviewing scope of work documents, legal terms, things like that. And more recently, I started working on an account, probably the largest social media company in the world. I'm sure you all have one of these accounts. Again, back to doing sourcing type work. So, and before that, I worked at Accenture doing similar type work. So that was a long-winded introduction.
That was long, Vince. I'm Bill Fishel. I've been with WNS Denali for about 3.5 years. Before that, I was actually at Accenture as well. I was there for about 5 years and in various different roles with them, but joined WNS, like I said, about 3 years ago. So I worked actually with a chemical manufacturer as well with Vince when I joined Denali, and then doing a lot of bids and on the raw material side, and then moved over to a entertainment company located in Las Vegas. Where I was doing a lot of contracts, and we'll get into a little bit because it's kind of spot buys. We were just basically doing 3 bids and a buy for their IT space. And then I moved over to a consumer packaged goods company out in Oakland, California, where I'm handling acting essentially as a category manager for them for the construction, real estate, finance, and travel. It's about $30 million of spend for them that I'm managing and doing the sourcing and contracts for that space.
Cool. Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
All right. So just Denali, WNS as a whole, we were established in 1996. As you can see, we have a lot of employees. Now that's WNS as a whole. We don't have that many people working just in sourcing. We have 90 global clients. We have 5 Center of Excellence locations. So we're a rather big company. You know, if at some point you have any interest in learning more about us, you know, please feel free to reach out to Bill or myself and we can tell you all about it. We'll give our contact information at the end of the presentation. So what is strategic sourcing? We're going to test your knowledge and see if you understand kind of what strategic sourcing is and is not based off of this activity we're going to do here next. First off, the definition. Strategic sourcing is a thoughtful approach to sourcing which leverages the consolidated purchasing power of the organization through adaptable methodologies. One of the main goals is to get a strategically selected supply base. There's not going to be a quiz. You don't have to know that definition. Just basically, this is a very basic introduction and definition of what strategic sourcing is. But as we go through this presentation, you'll learn exactly what this definition actually means. So using your reaction icons, choose the green check mark or red, or just, you don't even have to do that. You could just say out loud if you think that this is strategic sourcing or not. So the first one, focus on total cost of ownership and total value.
Feel free to come off mute if you want.
Yeah, you can come off mute. Bill, you're gonna have to tell me how many yeses or nos you see because I'm in.
I don't know, how do I do that? I don't even know how I see that.
Yeah, I don't know if you could. It doesn't matter. You guys could just come off of mute and say yes or no. This is very informal.
Let's see if we get any takeaways.
Yeah, we'll help you out with the first one here to get started.
Yeah. So it is, yeah. So you definitely want to focus on total cost of ownership and what the total value of the project would entail for the business.
All right. Focused only on purchase price, yes or no?
Come on, someone.
No.
All right.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, focus on purchase price. There's a lot of other factors that go into sourcing other than price. You know, you might be more concerned about high quality than price. You know, you might be concerned about something like a warranty, and you're willing to pay an extra $1,000 for the warranty, and you don't care about the price. Things like that. Driven by a rigorous and collaborative approach with key stakeholders.
Yes.
Correct.
Yep. I'll get the next one, Vince. Getting the required product service at the best value.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill. You can read the.
Let's see what's next. Getting the cheapest product or service. What do you guys think? All right, that one's a no.
No.
We're not necessarily getting the cheapest, right? You want to get the best value. So it could be they'll, maybe might be the most expensive, but they might be the best partner, say, for the company. They might be a better fit for the culture and things like that. But they might not be the cheapest.
We'll have a quick funny story on that one. We had a coworker that way back in the day did a internship at Kennywood. And believe it or not, Kennywood does have a procurement department. And they were, doing a bid to get the prizes that you win at, with the cat rack and things, the stuffed animals. And the person who was his boss for the internship, he said, he's asking him, what kind of quality are you looking for in these? He said, as long as the stuffed animal gets to the person's car without falling apart, that's all we care about. Once it leaves the park, we don't care if it disintegrates or falls apart. So in that case, they would be looking for the cheapest product. But, a lot of times you're not looking for the cheapest product because, think about, like parts for, like a railroad car or something like that. You obviously don't want to just go with the cheapest part and then the train derails. So, different situations call for different things.
Yep. Ad hoc activities involving only procurement in a silo. Oh, that's very wordy.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? All right, that one is a no. Right, procurement isn't just in a silo. We act as kind of the quarterback for all activities, right? Procurement does.
Right. Think about if you're working on a more complex project, you're going to need to bring in, the contracting team, maybe even like the marketing team. So we don't want to act in a silo, 90% of the time.
Yeah, definitely. Like even IT, for instance, I'm having a lot more involvement with IT just from a security risk standpoint, cybersecurity risk. So a lot of companies now, you have to almost always involve IT as well. All right, addresses all levers for savings. Yes. That's a yes. Yep. All right, let's go through these real quick. What's the other one? Focus on beating up suppliers. That one is also a no. You don't just want to focus on pricing and potentially damage that partnership that you might be getting with that supplier just by, reducing pricing by say 5%. It's just not good for a partnership with that vendor you might be using for the next 15 years.
Right. Yeah. Keep in mind that you have to have a continual relationship with these people that you're negotiating with. So you don't want to, you don't want to be in a smoky room pounding on the table, demanding certain things from the supplier because you're going to have to keep in a relationship long term with these people. So, there has to be a little bit of give and take on both sides.
Yep.
All right. A couple more.
Decision based on fact-based analysis, market intelligence.
Yes.
Yep. Decision based on opinion, unjustified preference, competency.
No.
Correct.
All right.
Whoever that is answering, you got a career in sourcing. You're getting all of them right.
Encompasses various tools and strategic approaches. That one's a yes.
Yeah, that one's a little confusing.
How many more do we have, Vince? I think we can just go to the next one.
Yeah, just doing market tenders. No, I'm going to go through all these. Then we could explain a couple of these. This is kind of painful. Okay, so like just doing market tenders. It's actually a little bit unethical to just run a market like an RFP or an RFI with no intent on awarding business. An RFI you can run because you're just gathering information, but if you run an RFP and really have no intent on awarding business, you're just trying to get like market information. That's actually very unethical. And then the last one I'll pick out here, rigid one size fits all sequence of events that promotes checks the box behaviors. Every RFP and every project you run is going to be different. If you're just trying to, use the same template and the same process for every project, you're not going to get very good results. You have anything to add there, Bill?
Oh, I think that's good.
Okay.
Try to be conscious of time here. So this is kind of an interesting slide. And I think if you actually kind of look at it now with inflation, you can kind of relate to this potentially. We're saying here that if you, this is essentially procurement's rule, right? So in doing a sourcing project, but if your revenue was flat, right? So if you, I think this is in millions, we'll just say if it was $1 million in revenue, but you'll spend, see the external spend was at 455 and it went down to 410. So you had a 10% reduction. Your net profit is 196. So let's go to the next example though, Vince. All right, so yeah, so if your revenue increases 30%, so if your sales went up 30%, but your spend, so say inflation, right? So say your inflation went up, and so your spend went up. So you have 593, 319 as compared to 245. Your net profit still stayed the same. So if you increase your sales, even and then its spend goes up, you're still spending the same. So I think the key takeaway here is, if you're able to get a reduction in spend, you're still able to achieve the same thing. Does that make sense? It's a little confusing.
Yeah, there's a lot of numbers on the screen here.
Yeah.
This box right here is probably the most important takeaway there. It takes a lot more sales effort to do the same job that procurement could do with less effort, basically. Any questions on that? All right. Go ahead.
Vince, is yours?
Yeah, I could take it. Yeah. So e-sourcing platforms and benefits. These are the most common platforms that we see and use on a regular basis. You've probably all heard of SAP Ariba. There's some other ones on here maybe you haven't heard of. iValua is a newer one. Zycus is a newer one. Scout, we use Coupa is pretty prevalent. So what are the benefits of using these as opposed to, maybe just running a bid on email? Well, the first one is supplier management. You can have literally 50 suppliers, and you just use the message center within like SAP Ariba, type out a message, and the message goes out to all 50 suppliers. If you're not using a sourcing platform and you're running this via email, imagine how many opportunities there are for mistakes there. Copying 50 email addresses, putting them in the BCC field. You can mistakenly put them in the CC field. You can mistakenly put an email address in there that shouldn't be in there. A whole slew of things could happen that would jeopardize your bid. You also get instant results. So when the RFP ends, you literally hit a button that says analysis, and it spits out an analysis for you. Now, more often than not, you have to do a more detailed analysis to what the tool gives you, but at least it gives you a starting point as opposed to, an email where you get 50 responses sent to you individually and you have to compile all that data together. Very time consuming. Again, centralized communication. You don't have people emailing you individually, which obviously could create an unfair advantage if people are emailing you individually instead of through the message center. And then the last one, and I feel this is a really important one, is if you're running a bid or an RFP in a sourcing tool, there's a clock with a countdown, and when the bid is over, that clock hits 0 and nobody can submit anymore. If you're running a bid via email, now you're stuck in a situation where you have to decide, okay, if the bid ends at 4 o'clock and somebody emails me at 4:05, do I accept that bid? Or, if somebody emails me at 7 o'clock, do I accept that bid? And, you know, you'll obviously have to consult with your stakeholder to see if they want to accept the bid. And it really creates an unfair advantage. So if you have the opportunity to use the sourcing tool, use the sourcing tool.
Has anybody used any of these? Feel free to come off mute. Has anybody used any of these tools? Just
Or at least heard of them.
Alright.
I've
And
heard of Oracle, really nothing else.
What's that?
I've heard of Oracle, but kind of I don't think of anything else.
Okay.
yeah,
SAP
Oracle's another one. Yeah.
Ariba was actually founded in Pittsburgh. But there was a company called Free Markets back in the day. Probably when before probably
Yeah.
doing myself a little bit, but it was a Free Markets and then Ariba, and then SAP actually just acquired Ariba probably about 10 years ago. So they're actually located in Pittsburgh. They're a great company to work for. You know, they do a lot of the sourcing.
Yeah.
platforms.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities to work in procurement in the greater Pittsburgh area for sure.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so this is the end-to-end procurement as a service capabilities landscape. We're just focusing on sourcing today, but your more complex projects, you're going to go through all of these steps in the process. So, you know, if you're doing something like 3 bids and a buy, like Bill alluded to earlier, say you're a local school and you're going to be administering an SAT test and you need, you know, 1,000 number 2 pencils. You're probably just going to pick up the phone and call like Staples, Office Max, Office Depot, see what their price is, compare the price of the 3 places you called and buy the pencils. You're not going to develop a strategy. You're not going to sign a contract and all that stuff. Now, for like a project I talked about earlier when I was working for the shoe manufacturer, we ran cafeteria services project. And that might sound simple, but it actually took us 6 months just to develop the RFP because it got down to a level of detail that was just crazy. You know, there were many buildings on campus, and each building had conference rooms, and it got down to the level where, you know, conference room A and building B had to have a 6-pack of Diet Pepsi, 6 bags of chips, 3 of which were sour cream and 3 of which were barbecue at all times. And, you know, we had to get all of that data into a spreadsheet. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of buildings on this campus. And not to mention the fact that there was also literal cafeterias involved too. And the menus were different at every location. So there was a operation in Oregon, obviously. Then there was one in St. Louis and there was one in Memphis. The people in Oregon, they're very health conscious and they wanted salads and kale and things like that. The menu in Memphis, they wanted fried catfish and onion rings, you know? So, you know, the more you think about it, the more complex it got. And like I said, it took us 6 months just to develop the strategy and build the RFP. And then we ran the RFP and there were, I think, 3 or 4 rounds of bidding within the RFP. And then eventually we had to negotiate the contract. The whole process took about 18 months when it was all said and done. So big difference between buying number 2 pencils and something like cafeteria service.
And I think real quick, I think one thing to add is just a lot of companies for spot buys, right? They have a spend threshold that they use for spot buying. So say it's anything less than $50,000 of annual spend would go to like a spot buy. Some companies do 50, some people do like 100K. So if it's underneath a certain threshold, typically, you know, it might just be a 3 bid and a buy, send it out, see what the pricing is. If it's something that's more than $100,000, that might just be, you know, might be like an RFX execution. And then if it's anything over, I don't know, 500K or something like that, it might be more strategic sourcing. But it's going to be a long-term, 6 months, you know, a year-long project. So it kind of depends on what that anticipated or that annual spend is for that specific project and how that's broken out.
No, that's a good point, Bill. Yeah, a lot of it seems like the larger the company, like Bill saying, the threshold, anything under a certain threshold, they consider what they call tail spend.
Mhm.
They don't really care much about, spending a lot of time figuring it out. They just need you to go out and get it.
But it depends what it is, right? If some things can be low spend but have a high risk component to it. So it depends on what you're doing though. But most of the time you can use your spend.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Because when I was on the chemical manufacturer, I was doing a lot of repeat buys for a thing called heat exchangers, and while they were low spend, less than $20,000, they were critical in the manufacturing of chemicals, because if that broke, the whole system shut down. So
Right.
Good point, Bill. Even though that was lower spend, we were still running, very detailed RFPs for them.
Right now, I'm actually doing a project right now. Just to give a little visibility, is like document storage and shredding. So it's not a whole lot of spend. I think it's maybe like $50,000, but right, it's really we want to make sure that we're selecting the right vendor because they have confidential documents, those shredding documents. This could be a potential if something were to happen to those documents. So it has more visibility and more risk associated with it. So that would be more of a strategic project that it will involve with, just because it's higher risk involved.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah. Enough on
that. So this is the quote unquote Denali way for strategic sourcing. If, like I said, if Accenture were to show you this, there might be a 7th step in here. If somebody else were to come in, there might only be 5 steps. But the point is that, basically any company that's running a bid is going to go through these steps. You're going to initiate, develop, execute, evaluate, negotiate, and manage. Again, depending on the complexity of the project, you might spend more time in the develop phase, or the negotiation phase could sometimes last for months on end. It just really depends on the complexity of the project. Today, for the purposes of this class, we're focusing more on the execute and evaluate, and a little bit on the negotiate phase. And you can see what the steps are in each one of these phases, and we'll get more into this with our example later on. All right. Was this mine or yours, Bill? I can't remember.
I can talk about it.
Okay.
So this is just the different roles within procurement. So I think I alluded to a little bit earlier, but procurement is essentially like if you kind of look at it, it's kind of like the quarterback on a project. So stakeholder, people within the business from across the company will kind of look to you for questions, updates, things like that. So you're the kind of the main point of contact for that particular project. You might not have all the answers of the project. You might have to go find those answers, but you're really the point person for that project. So you kind of really multiple hats within that. So those, I think in here it's saying support operational requirements. So the company might have an initiative to say, hey, we want to save $200 million over the next, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. So that could be part of a company initiative, or they might want to, I think Vince, you mentioned about like going green or reducing emissions. So that could also be like a operational requirement that the business wants overall. It's just the strategic plan. So how does that plan fit into what procurement's role is within that specific project that you're managing? Anything you want to add on that, Vince?
No, I think you got it covered there. You always want to, especially when you're in a role like we are as basically consultants, you want to make sure that you're, checking and aligning with whatever the company, initiatives are before you just go ahead and build the RFP.
Yep. So next is managing the sourcing process. So, it's setting up weekly calls, maybe with the different stakeholders. It's reaching out to the different, doing, researching suppliers in the market, gathering those vendors in a list, sharing them with the stakeholders, finding out, okay, who do we want to go after, and then getting all the requirements built out and building that RFP, and then getting it out to the market, analyzing those results, giving it back to the stakeholders. So that's all part of you're managing that entire process. You're communicating with the suppliers, you're fielding questions from the suppliers that they might have about the RFP or the project that they're going to be doing, and you'll be taking those questions, then sending those back out to the business for them to answer if needed. So you're kind of managing that entire process of that sourcing. The next on that is cost savings. I think we, obviously that kind of goes back to I think the operational requirements, but you want to continually drive cost savings in that project. You might not always have cost savings, but it's definitely a function that we play. I think the next one's the most important really, is develop stakeholder relationships. So you want to be, way I look at it is brought to the table, right? So you want to have visibility of a project that's going on. You're not going to be able to be involved if you're not brought to the table. So what that means is you want to build good relationships with your stakeholders, with that business. So for instance, I help manage like the travel within the company I support. So I want to make sure that I have a strong relationship with the global travel manager and director. So that way, when a project comes up or there's something that they're not happy with a supplier, we can then give insight and say, hey, I think this could go out to RFP, or we could look at, what other vendors are out there, do some analysis work. So it's really kind of being brought to the table in those discussions. So I think that's really, it's an important key in this kind of pie. And support organizational strategic initiatives. Vince, does that mainly go back to the operational requirements too?
Yeah, so
I think so.
this way, supporting operational requirements is like if they require an NDA for every supplier before you run a bid. And organizational initiatives is like you must invite. Let me think of a good example. I've run.
You gotta have like 3 vendors participating in the bid.
Yeah,
Like
and
that.
in like a strategic initiative, like you alluded to earlier, might be to reduce our carbon footprint. So when you're thinking of inviting suppliers to a bid, you might want to do some research and see have like environmentally friendly initiatives and things like that.
Divulge supplier, that's a big one today.
Yes.
You might always have to include a minority owned business potentially in that RFP. So you want to make sure that you're diversifying those vendors as well.
Correct. And then I do want to touch on develop stakeholder relationships as well, just to emphasize what Bill said. I think that probably is the most important one on here. Us as Denali, we are really seen as like partners. So, we're not just seen as a consultant that comes in. Oftentimes we serve as the company's procurement department because they don't have one. And if they do have one, we are partners with them. We're not just, an outside consultant. We attend all their internal calls and things like that. So you really want to develop those key relationships and, develop that trust. But beyond that, you really want to understand the personalities of the people that you're dealing with. When you get on a call, like I have a stakeholder right now, she just doesn't have time for chit chat when the call starts. It's like, okay, let's get down. What's the purpose of this call? Why are we here? But then I have other stakeholders who are like, hey, let's talk about the Super Bowl. Let's talk about that storm last week. Let's talk about my kid's hockey game. And you got to kind of really know your audience, and knowing your audience will help you develop those stakeholder relationships and good rapport with the stakeholders, because it isn't really one size fits all. So you have to be able to adapt, but you also have to kind of learn and understand the personalities of the people that you're dealing with.
This is Rob from WVU Procurement. I have something to build on that a little bit as well, Vince.
Okay.
This goes beyond, Denali's a service provider and they're a partner of ours, obviously, and we're working on a bigger partnership, or they probably wouldn't be here talking to you guys. But it is critical for them to develop relationships within WVU and so forth and so on. But I just want to add that if you go to work for a procurement department, whether it be WVU or Toyota or wherever, right, the same thing applies. As a procurement professional, you become a strategic partner as you develop relationships internally within your organization. So think VP of facilities, think chief financial officer, on down the line, chief information officer. Once you develop those relationships, you become a partner, then these folks are willing to open their world up to you and start valuing your advice on it. So this doesn't apply strictly to a consulting company customer relationship. I view my team and I tell them, you guys are consultants to this university. I'm writing performance reviews this week. And one of the constant themes on areas for development is start establishing better relationships with your internal stakeholders.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. That's a great point and really well said. It's really key because let's face it, you know, when a company like us comes in, there can definitely be some resistance at first, especially when there's a procurement company already there. So, you know, building those relationships and building that rapport is really key to running, you know, successful bids. All right. This one's you, Bill.
Yep. So those essentially two types of spend. Those what we call direct spend and indirect spend. Did you guys learn about direct versus indirect spend? I don't know, Jeremy, if you could touch on that or not. I can't remember.
Direct is easy, indirect's a bear.
Yeah, we did cover that in class.
Okay, all right. So just high level, you know, I think direct, like I tend to look at direct, it's essential to the business, right? So if they can't produce a chemical that potentially goes into, say, bleach, for example, that could impact their bottom line, right? So that company might not be able to get products on the shelf, which would have a direct impact to the business, or the plastic that might go into that bottle. So those other components, right, that you would consider as being direct, so directly impact your revenue and your bottom line. Whereas indirect, it's critical to the business, but it's not going to affect that product still getting on the shelf. So for instance, you know, if what can I say? Maybe professional services. So you have a janitorial company that you might be working with. You know, they clean the office, and you know, but if it's not something that's critical to the bottom line of the company that would impact your revenue loss. So I mean, some of them it's kind of fuzzy. You know, you could also say like IT, for instance. You know, if your IT system were to go down, or your ERP system, your Oracle would go down, that might have an impact, but it's not potentially going to affect the product still getting on the shelf.
Yeah, and Bill, not to put you on the spot, but when you were working on the account for the casino company in Las Vegas, what would they consider as a direct material?
Yeah, so it's good point. So that would be considered a direct, right? Because I was helping them out with the like surveillance systems. So if you think about a casino and surveillance, that you know, that's something that's pretty vital to that company. If that surveillance system were to go down, you know, that casino might not be able to function. So you know, those kind of a fine line. But when I was doing chemicals and raw materials, that's obviously a direct impact for a chemical manufacturer. So it's like I said, those definitely in that circle, though, you can see how the circles kind of blend together. It definitely depends on the company that you're doing procurement with. Rob, I don't know, you know, if procurement with WVU, for example, you know, if I guess, you know, you could probably have some examples, you know, as well, but you know, I guess you could say the faculty. If you didn't have the faculty, I mean, you can't have a university, or if you're not paying the heat or the electric bills, you know, you can't have classrooms. I guess you could do online now, but so it kind of varies with what you're looking at.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, I would say our world is all indirect if you really think about it. Further to that, it's running a city with education on top of it, right? Everything from dining to hotels, you know, if you think logically about what we do. So procurement at WVU gets involved in all of those things.
Yep.
from Reynolds Hall all the way down to the chairs you sit in class.
Yeah, food. I didn't think about food. Yeah, if you don't have food or cafeteria, right?
Yep.
It's gonna be a little challenging to have a university.
All right. All right, key success factors. I'm just going to pick out a couple of these. You know, there has to be buy-in from the people that are your stakeholders. Otherwise, the bid's not going to turn out great. So the first one there, willingness to switch to other suppliers, no sacred cows. Basically, what that means is you have to be willing to switch from your incumbent supplier, your current supplier. Otherwise, there's no point in running a bid. I'll give a quick example on this one. I ran a bid for laptops for a large bank, nationwide bank, and they were looking to replace all their laptops. And the head of IT said, "This is stupid. I don't even know why we're doing this. We all know we're going to award to HP when this is done." And it was like, he's like, "The only reason I'm running this bid is because it's a requirement of the company." So right there, it was like, okay, this is going to be an uphill battle. But we went through, we ran the bid, and we ended up awarding, I think it was to Acer, and we saved over $1 million, which this was a long time ago. So at that time, that was quite a win. And the IT person at the end of the bid said, "Well, I guess you proved me wrong." And it's like, yeah, it made it difficult throughout the whole process that this guy kept on thinking, "Oh, we're just going to award to HP," but we ended up awarding to a different supplier. So that's what we mean by no sacred cows. I'm going to pick another one out of here. Willingness to challenge existing specifications and business processes. So, I have another one there. We were running a bid for IT hardware, and I was looking at the specs, and I looked at it and I said, "You guys have been running this piece of hardware for 5 years now. Why are you paying for platinum level of support on this that's 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, when you know that it's working, and it's not even that critical a piece of hardware to the business?" So I kind of challenged that specification, and they were like, "Yeah, you're right, this is stupid." So we reduced it down to silver level, where it was just support during regular business hours, and just that alone saved $30,000. So willingness to really dig into specifications and details and say, "Hey, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense." And then the last one, we kind of already touched on this. You can't work in a silo. You have to really be willing to work cross-functionally with, even though we're in procurement, we have to work with, obviously IT, like we just said, sometimes marketing, almost always legal at the end of the project. So there has to be that collaborative spirit and cross-functionality. Otherwise, it's going to be an uphill battle from the beginning. Any questions on this, or Bill, do you have anything to add to this?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, so we're going to run through a project example here. This is the situation. So WVU Athletics Department wants to have a Gold Rush game for a men's basketball game. They have requested that Rob's department help find with gold-related items. Basically, we're looking for gold shirts, gold hats, and gold pom-poms for this game. The three suppliers that we have used in the past, and apologize for the cheesy names of these companies. We have Shirts. They have used them in the past, but the last time they sent us shirts, the logos were printed upside down. Tony's Tees, they're a business located in Morgantown, so they're local. And then Online Tees, we've used them before, but they have historically long lead times and they're shipping from California. So this is the scenario, and I'm going to stop sharing for a second and switch out of this and switch into another file. All right. So this is a spreadsheet. It's a very basic spreadsheet that we would maybe put together for this type of bid. Before I actually go through the tabs and talk about the RFP, I just want to real quickly point out a few things. When you are sending out a large spreadsheet, this isn't even that large, but we've sent out spreadsheets that have 70 tabs across the bottom here. That one that I was talking about earlier with the cafeteria services, I think we had 75 tabs on the bottom. So the first thing is number your tabs, because inevitably a supplier is going to call you and have a question about a tab, and it's a lot easier for them to say, hey, on tab 4, I have a question about row 31, rather than saying, hey, that supplier bids tab in between the pricing workbook tab and the pricing analysis tab. When you have 75 tabs, it's hard to locate that. Spell check your tabs. So in Excel, a lot of people don't think about spell check a lot, but it's just as important as a Word document. So you want to spell check. Now, spell check only works on the tab that you're on. You can hit the control key and hold in all these tabs and then hit spell check, but it's not going to be the same. It's going to take you forever if you have 75 tabs that you have to go through and hold down the control key. So you're better off just spell checking each individual tab. You always want to have an instructions tab, of course, and you want your tabs to look consistent. So have the logo in the same place, have the header in the same color and font, and have them at the same zoom level. You don't want like one tab to be at 90% zoom and then the next one to be at like 170% zoom. You want them to look consistent. And this one might sound ridiculous, but I'll tell you why. If at all possible, make your tabs printable. Now, printing an Excel sheet probably sounds ridiculous to you, but a lot of our bid, not a lot, but in certain cases, we are dealing with people who are not computer literate or people who just don't use computers. We run bids with a lot of truckers, and they'll literally print out the pricing workbook, write it in, and then have somebody else go online and fill it out for them. So if at all possible, now obviously if you have 10,000 rows of data, you're not going to have it printable, but that's just something to consider.
And lock them too. Protect the sheet.
Yeah, that's lock your formulas. So lock every cell other than the one that you want them to type in, because they could easily go in here and accidentally change this formula, and then when you're doing your analysis, you're like, why is this 0? And you have to go back and figure out, okay, why is that 0? And a lot of times that's because somebody messed up the formula. 99% of the time it's not intentional, but I have seen it happen where somebody goes in, changes the formula to make it advantageous to them, and that's not a good situation.
I just had a vendor just literally took the proposal, or like what an invoice would be for the scope, and then just upload that right into the Excel sheet because I didn't protect it. So then you have to run your whole analysis and go back to them and get clarification on different pricing, just because it wasn't, they just copying and pasting though an invoice into the Excel sheet.
Yeah, and another one is make sure you're consistent and notifying everybody what currency to use, especially when you have international bidders.
Yep.
That happened to me one time. I'm like, this supplier's pricing is too good to be true. And it took us a week to realize that they bid in, I think it was Euro instead of USD. And obviously we had to go back to them and have them fix that. But so to go through these tabs here, obviously, have an instruction sheet. In this case, it's going to be very simple. We're just telling them to fill out the form and send it to us. Project intake. Now, this is not external facing. This is internal, but these are the questions for this you want to ask. The timing, when do you need it by? contact information. Do we have an incumbent supplier? Do we have a contract with them already? What's the budget? Any project background, things like that. Again, this is very basic, but some more complex projects, this intake form might be 500 rows. Project timeline. So I want to spend a little bit of time on this. A simple project like this, it's going to basically, you're going to put out a bid, you're going to tell them when you need it by, and you would obviously put the dates in here, week 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're running a more complex bid, you have to consider things like when is your stakeholder going to be on PTO? That's important to know. I had a bid end one time. The bid ended on Thursday, and on Wednesday, the stakeholder told me that he was going on vacation for 10 days. He never told me until the bid was ending. So needless to say, that put a huge damper on the timeline, because obviously you need the stakeholder there to validate results, things like that. So that extended the whole timeline by 10 days. Consider holidays. So if you're starting a bid in November and it's going to go on for a few months, you have to take into account Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, things like that. In the business world, people start disappearing after about the first week of December. So keep that in mind. If you have international suppliers participating in a bid, you have to, take into consideration international holidays, Chinese New Year, Diwali, things like that. If you have European bidders in the summertime, I think everybody takes the whole summer off in Europe. So keep that in mind as well. That's a true story. It's very hard to track down people in Europe in the summertime. Are you going on vacation? Make sure you work that into the timeline as well. A lot of things to consider in the timeline portion. I don't know, Bill, if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, just make sure, like even my client, like for instance, like they have half-day Fridays in the summertime, and people tend to take off Fridays. Just kind of build that in, and build framing out meetings when you need to be meeting with the teams and getting on calendars ahead of time. Just because if you have a VP, the calendar might be booked solid for the next 2 weeks, so you want to make sure that you get the timeline kind of figured out, and so that way you can get some placeholders on calendars, just so you can have those discussions that you need to. So it's always good to build out that timeline, and I think it also makes you look a little bit better organized, right? As being kind of the go-to person on a project. So if you have the timeline and you walk through it with the team, I think they all appreciate that. So everyone has a clear understanding of what the expectations are.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if you can at all avoid it, if you get into the procurement world and you're in charge of running bids, don't ever have an RFP end on a Friday. Because like Bill said, people take off on Fridays, people take half days. And if you do have it end on a Friday, have it end at noon, because if you have to track somebody down at 5 o'clock on a Friday, it's nearly impossible. I always like to have bids end on Thursdays, if at all possible. All right, the pricing workbook. Again, this is going to be very basic. We're looking for 5,000 shirts, gold shirts, size extra large, gold colored hats, and gold colored pom-poms with white handles. Again, when you're putting this bid out, you want to be as detailed as possible. So we're telling them we want a navy blue shirt with the basketball logo in the middle. And then we want all size extra larges for obvious reasons. It just makes things a lot easier. On the hat, we want the WVU logo on the front. And then we want a gold pom-pom with a white handle. So you want to be as detailed as possible. We're looking for 5,000 each of these. Basically, it's going to be for the student section. And then we're just asking them to enter their price in the green cells here, their lead time, and any comments they have. And again, we're indicating that we need this to be in USD. One thing too, I always like to add a comments section in a pricing workbook, because if they're just entering price, they might want to explain further. So they might enter their price here, but then they might come over here in the comment section and say, hey, if you buy 10,000, the price goes down to $1 a shirt instead of $1.50 a shirt. You know, you always want to give an opportunity for comment.
I do have a caveat to that though, right? Because they may use that as a way to alter pricing or use that as an open field to put information in there that you didn't request. And it just skews, right? It could skew your like say unit of measure, say it's based on something completely different, say it's based on a box, right? Versus like a cubic foot. So you just don't know. They could change what the unit of measure is in that comment field, which could then skew your entire pricing. So it's I think it's a good thing and a bad thing.
It could definitely go either way.
Yeah.
I just go back to the example that I gave. I saw that happen before, where somebody put in a comment section like, hey, you know, this is our price for 5,000, but here's our price for 10,000. And we ended up saying, oh, well, what the heck, let's just buy 10,000 because we're gonna need these again next year anyway. So, but like, it could definitely go both ways, because you're opening yourself to a world of other things too when you leave a comments box.
Yeah, they could not even fill out any of those other fields and just put everything in the comment section.
Oh, for sure. And you know, is detail, you could give the most detailed instructions in the world, but it's definitely going to happen where they don't follow instructions. So that's where your supplier management skills come into play.
Yep.
All right. So these are the supplier bids that came back, and let me just make, yeah, there's no comments. We locked the comments field in this case. We didn't let them make any comments. So any observations? I know we're getting a little short on time here, but any observations on the pricing that came back here? We have the 3 suppliers. We have their price per unit. We have their shipping per unit. And then we have the total cost here.
And can you maybe zoom out and you can see the whole thing? I don't know. It's hard to.
Yeah.
There you
That better?
go. Yeah, there you go.
Still, there you go. All right. So in the interest of time, I'll just point a couple things out here. Tony's Tees, which is the local supplier, they're not charging us shipping at all because they're right down the street, which also means that their lead time is a lot shorter, only 5 days compared to 10, and then 45 coming from California. So that's one thing. Online tees, they are the cheapest as far as unit cost goes, but their shipping cost is much higher, double, and obviously there's none here. So just a couple of observations from here. So when we go over and do our pricing analysis, we see that and again, our budget's $50,000, which I don't think I mentioned before. So, you know, we go through and we do our analysis, and we see that shirts is actually $2,500 over budget. Online tees is $7,500 over budget. Tony's Tees isn't saving us any money, but they come in right at budget. And that's, you know, kind of a takeaway from this. You're not always going to save money. Obviously, when you're running a bid, that's your goal. You know, you're trying to drive savings, but it's not always going to happen. I had a situation when I was working for the chemical manufacturer. They were using this product called lime slurry. I don't know what it was or what it did. They said, we're increasing our price 5%. And my stakeholder said, well, you go back to them and tell them we're switching suppliers if they don't come down and, you know, to like a 1% increase. And so I did. And they said, okay, good luck with that. We are the only supplier of lime slurry in the country. And we gladly accepted their 5% increase because we had no other option. So, you know, that was probably, you know, poor research on our parts going back to them and saying that. But in that situation, we had no choice. We had to accept the 5% increase. So, you know, in this situation, our budget's 50,000 and our best option is just breaking even at 50,000. So that's the pricing analysis part of it. Now we'll go into the scorecard. So we put this scorecard together and we kind of identify what's important to us and what isn't. And so in this case, the most important thing to us was the price of the shirts and the lead time. We don't care about the quality. Again, this is kind of goes back to the Kennywood example, which Kennywood Park is an amusement park in Pittsburgh, in case some of you don't know. But quality wasn't important to us. We just want the shirt to last the duration of the basketball game. If you go outside, we don't care if it disintegrates. So we don't care about the quality, but we did care about the price of the shirts because that's going to be our most expensive item, and the lead time. We wanted to get there in time. So after the bid was over, we sent the scorecard out to, the stakeholder and, whoever else was involved, and asked them to fill this out based on this scoring key. And, somebody else might show you a scorecard and it might have a scoring key of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or even 1 through 10. I like using 1, 3, and 5 because it really forces somebody to make a decision. Because if you use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, inevitably whoever's filling out the scorecard, they're not going to give anybody a 1 because they feel bad, and they're not going to give anybody a 5 because they just don't give out 5s. So with the scale of 1, 3, and 5, it really makes the person make a decision. Okay, were they good, bad, or average? Bill, you have anything to add to this? I thought you.
Yeah, I think in my experience as well, typically like those categories and those weights is something that I'd go back to the business with as well, to just kind of validate with them.
Yes.
To say, hey, what are things that are important to you? You might, this one's pretty easy here. I think, what do you have, 5 or 6 different fields. So, you might have something where you have a large RFP and you might have 10, 15, 20 different fields, and you want to go back to all those different categories and kind of validate everything with them, and really kind of hone in on what that weight is, because it really has an impact on how that supply scrolls in that scorecard, right? So I think, it depends on how much weight you're going to put into it, but I think, you do want to kind of vet that with the business.
Yeah. And one thing too, if you have multiple departments scoring a scorecard, you don't want to have somebody from legal scoring the IT section. You don't want to have somebody from marketing scoring the legal section. So, you got to be really careful with the instructions on, filling out the scorecard as well. So, as you can see, after we compiled all of our results from the scorecard, you could see that Tony's Tees ends up with the highest average score, and that's why they're in green here as the #1 rank. So any questions on this? I know we ran through that kind of quick, but I also know that we're running out of time.
Quiet.
All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this for a second, and I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. So I'm going to put Bill and I's contact information up here. Share. So again, if you have any questions about anything we talked about today, or if you want to know more about Denali, if you're a junior or senior, looking, for a career in procurement, definitely feel free to reach out to us. Obviously can't guarantee employment or anything like that, but we have hired people from these classes before. So again, feel free to reach out to us, even if it's, not about Denali. If you just want us to maybe, have a question about your resume or, anything we talked about today, please feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah. And I know, obviously we work in procurement, but there's tons of opportunity right now in procurement. Right. You got inflation going on right now. You got companies that are really looking at cost savings and trying to cut costs. So, they look at procurement professionals, right, to kind of come in and run a lot of these strategic sourcing projects for them and really drive savings for the company. So, I think it's been a really great career. I didn't graduate with procurement. I graduated in marketing, but then I moved into a procurement role now, and I can't talk highly enough about it.
Yeah, I think 90% of the people that work in procurement accidentally fell into procurement, because I have an undergraduate degree in marketing and master's degree in management, and I ended up working in procurement. So it's just, but there's so many opportunities in procurement now as compared to, when Bill and I finished school, or even, like 10 years ago. So again, if you have any questions about the procurement industry, or, anything that we talked about today, please feel free to reach out to us.
You definitely have a leg up too with taking these classes.
Yes.
Something I never had.
Yeah, for sure. Any?
But-
or anything?
Yep. Thanks, Vince and Bill. Does
Yeah.
anybody have any last minute questions? Still have a couple minutes of class. I guess not. Well, make sure you write down their emails in case you do have a question later. And I'll be sending out a link for this recording. That way you guys can review it, because there's a lot of great information in here. And I always learn something every time I listen to this presentation. And honestly, I've seen this presentation several times, and there's always something new. So if there's nothing else, I guess we'll call it a day.
All right, well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.